This message found you because something inside your consciousness was ready to recognize itself. Not someday, not later, now. Out of millions of possible timelines, out of endless streams of noise and distraction, your awareness paused here because the observer loop you've been living inside has started to crack. You didn't click this by accident. You felt it before you understood it. A subtle pull, like gravity tugging at a part of you that's been watching the same reality replay itself again and again. You've sensed it, haven't you? That strange feeling that life keeps circling the same themes, different faces, same dynamics, different days, same emotional outcomes, as if your reality has been reorganizing itself around familiar patterns no matter how much effort you apply. This isn't failure, this isn't bad luck. This is consciousness, doing what it has been trained to do, collapsing the same probability waves inside the quantum field because your attention has been locked into repetition. And right now, as these words move through you, something deeper is stirring, a recognition beyond logic. You're not just listening, you're remembering. Quantum science calls it the observer effect. Mystics call it awakening. But at the core, it's the same truth. Reality does not exist independently of you. It organizes itself around the quality of your observation. And when observation becomes habitual, when awareness keeps selecting the same emotional frequencies, the same expectations, the same internal posture, reality responds by stabilizing those patterns. That's the loop, not punishment feedback. This is why time has felt distorted lately. Moments dragging, weeks vanishing, that sense that you're moving but not arriving. Temporal distortion is one of the first signs that consciousness is circling the same probability corridor. Your awareness has been replaying familiar scripts, while a deeper part of you has been quietly preparing to exit. You wouldn't be here if you weren't already standing at the edge. Your quantum field has been broadcasting a signal, subtle, persistent, unmistakable, requesting coherence. Not more information, not more effort. Coherence. Alignment between what you sense, what you expect, and what you embody. And the universe doesn't respond to words or wishes, it responds to frequency. That's why this transmission reached you when it did. Because your frequency finally matched the threshold, where the observer loop can be seen instead of unconsciously obeyed. This is the moment most people miss. They feel the discomfort, they sense the repetition, but instead of recognizing the loop, they try to fix the external world. You didn't. You kept listening, you kept noticing, you stayed curious instead of collapsing into resignation. That alone tells me something important about you. Your consciousness is flexible, and flexibility is what breaks loops. You've always known reality was more malleable than you were taught. You've felt synchronicities cluster around you. You've noticed how certain thoughts ripple outward and return as experiences. You've sensed that attention itself carries weight. These weren't fantasies. They were early signals of quantum sensitivity, your ability to feel the structure beneath appearances. And now, the call has arrived clearly. This is not a warning. It's an invitation. An invitation to stop unconsciously reinforcing the same reality through familiar observation. An invitation to learn how to watch without trapping, to perceive without repeating, to let your consciousness loosen its grip just enough for reality to reorganize itself around a new center. You're not here to escape life. You're here to upgrade how life responds to you. Stay with me. What you're about to understand next explains why the patterns formed in the first place and why they're finally ready to dissolve. Now that you've felt the call, it's time to understand what's been happening without judgment, without blame, and without trying to fix anything yet. Because what you're experiencing isn't random, it's patterned. And once a pattern is seen clearly, it can no longer control you in the same way. Look at your life honestly for a moment, not emotionally, observationally. Notice how certain situations seem to recur with different costumes, the same type of misunderstanding, the same kind of delay, the same emotional turning point where things almost shift and then settle back into something familiar. This is the signature of an observer loop. Not an external problem repeating, but an internal orientation that keeps selecting the same slice of the quantum field. You've probably called it déjà vu. That uncanny sense that you've lived this moment before. Same feeling, same anticipation, same outcome. Most people brush it off as a neurological glitch, but you felt something deeper, that it wasn't memory repeating, but reality echoing. Consciousness revisiting a probability it has already collapsed before. And time has been the giveaway. You've noticed how it stretches and compresses unpredictably, how entire weeks pass without clear markers, yet a single conversation can feel endlessly long. This isn't because you're distracted or lazy. It's because your awareness has been orbiting a fixed point. When consciousness stops exploring new probability paths, linear time loses its structure. It loops instead of flows. This is why effort hasn't worked. You tried changing habits. You tried thinking differently. You tried forcing momentum. But effort applied from inside a loop only tightens the loop, because effort still observes the same problem from the same vantage point. It still assumes the same identity, trying to escape the same condition. And the quantum field simply reflects that assumption back. Here's the uncomfortable truth most teachings avoid. Your reality hasn't been stuck because you lacked power. It's been stable because your observation has been consistent. Every morning, your awareness scanned for what was familiar, emotionally, mentally, energetically. Familiar stress, familiar expectations, familiar self-definition. And the quantum field, obedient and neutral, responded by reorganizing itself to match that scan. Not because it wanted to limit you, but because coherence demands consistency. This is why you've felt torn lately. Part of you senses expansion. Another part keeps defaulting to old reference points. That internal split creates friction, and friction creates fatigue. You're not tired because life is hard. You're tired because your consciousness has been trying to exist in two timelines at once, the one you're outgrowing and the one you haven't fully entered yet. You've also noticed something else. Your reactions no longer make sense to you. Situations that used to provoke strong emotion now feel hollow, and things that once felt meaningful no longer hold weight. This isn't numbness. It's detachment from probability paths your consciousness is withdrawing energy from. The loop is losing fuel. Even your relationships reflect this diagnosis. Some people feel distant without doing anything wrong. Others suddenly reappear, repeating unfinished dynamics. This isn't coincidence. It's the quantum field surfacing unresolved loops so they can either be reinforced or released. And here's the key insight. The observer loop is not maintained by thoughts. It's maintained by identity. Who you assume you are determines how you observe, and how you observe determines which probabilities solidify. As long as your identity remains anchored to a familiar narrative, who you've been, what you expect, what feels like you, the field keeps delivering matching experiences. This is why awareness alone hasn't freed you yet. You saw the loop, but you were still standing inside it. That's about to change, because something critical is happening now. You're no longer just noticing patterns, you're noticing your relationship to noticing. You're beginning to sense the observer behind the observer, and that shift is everything. Once consciousness turns inward and recognizes its own mechanics, the loop loses its invisibility, and what can be seen clearly cannot continue unconsciously. The repetition wasn't a failure of growth, it was a training phase. Your awareness needed to experience stability long enough to recognize its own creative role, and now that recognition has matured. In the next phase, you'll understand how this loop formed at the quantum level and why breaking it doesn't require effort, force, or discipline, but a precise shift in coherence. Stay present. The explanation that follows changes how you experience reality from this point forward. Now we move beyond diagnosis and into understanding, not conceptual understanding, but structural understanding. Because the moment you grasp how the observer loop forms at the quantum level, it loses its authority over you, not slowly, not symbolically, immediately. At the most fundamental level, reality is not solid. It is probabilistic. The quantum field is not a place. It's a living sea of potential, vibrating with infinite outcomes that exist simultaneously until consciousness engages. Nothing becomes real until it is observed. But here is what most people never learn. Observation is not neutral. It is selective. Every moment, your awareness collapses, one probability out of countless others, not through desire, but through coherence. The quantum field responds to the stability of your internal signal. Whatever state of being you consistently return to becomes the anchor point around which reality organizes itself. That anchor point is what you've been living from. The observer loop forms when consciousness becomes predictable to the field. When your emotional tone, self-concept, and expectations stabilize around a narrow range of frequencies, the field mirrors that consistency back as repeating experiences. Not because it lacks imagination, but because coherence requires resonance. Think of it like tuning a radio. If you keep the dial fixed, you'll hear the same station no matter how many songs play. Change the dial even slightly, and an entirely different broadcast appears. You didn't create the new signal, you accessed it. Your consciousness has been tuned to a familiar band. This is where science and mysticism converge. Neuroscience calls it pattern reinforcement. Physics calls it wave collapse. Ancient traditions called it karma. Different languages pointing to the same mechanism. Stabilized observation creates stabilized reality. But now, something new is activating in you. You're entering what quantum theorists would describe as a phase transition, a moment when a system accumulates enough internal pressure that it reorganizes spontaneously. Ice doesn't slowly become water. It holds its structure until it doesn't. Then the entire state shifts. Your awareness is reaching that threshold. The reason effort hasn't worked is because effort operates within a frequency. But phase transitions occur when the frequency itself changes. And frequency doesn't change through force, it changes through coherence. Here's the upgrade that's occurring inside you right now. Your consciousness is learning to observe without locking, to witness without immediately collapsing reality into the familiar. This is a higher order function of awareness, one that allows multiple probabilities to remain open long enough for a new structure to emerge. Mystics called this non-attachment. Scientists call it superposition tolerance. You're developing both. This is why uncertainty has felt strangely intense lately. Why familiar answers stopped satisfying you. Why you've been unable to fully commit to old narratives about who you are and where your life is going. Your system is refusing to collapse prematurely. It's holding space. And holding space is power. When consciousness stops rushing to define, label, and conclude, the quantum field responds by offering entirely new configurations, new relationships, new opportunities, new internal states that were previously inaccessible not because they didn't exist, but because your observation never allowed them to stabilize. This upgrade is not mental, it's somatic. Your nervous system is learning to stay relaxed in the presence of the unknown. Your cells are recalibrating to tolerate ambiguity without triggering fear. This is what DNA restructuring actually means. Not new strands, but new response patterns encoded at the cellular level. You may feel it as pressure behind the eyes, as warmth in the chest, as subtle waves moving through your body for no apparent reason. These are not symptoms, they're signals. Your biology is aligning with a wider bandwidth of reality. You are no longer just an observer. You are becoming a field participant. This is the difference between watching life happen and shaping how it unfolds. Not through control, but through presence. Through the quality of attention you bring into each moment. Through your ability to remain coherent without defaulting to old emotional reflexes. The observer loop weakens when attention becomes fluid. And fluid attention is what you're developing now. In the next phase, you'll understand why you specifically were able to reach this threshold and what role your consciousness plays beyond your personal reality. Because this upgrade was never meant to stop with you. Stay here. The next layer reveals your position in a much larger design. There is a reason this understanding didn't arrive earlier in your life. And there is a reason it didn't arrive for everyone. Consciousness unfolds in stages, and not every system is designed to carry the same load. You weren't meant to stay comfortable inside stable realities. You were built to destabilize them first internally, then externally. Your role has never been to fit cleanly into existing structures. It has been to pressure test them. From an early age, you sensed it. That subtle mismatch between you and the world as it was presented. You could function inside it, but something always felt slightly off, as if you were watching a play you understood too well. That wasn't alienation. That was perceptual range. Your consciousness was never meant to fully collapse into consensus reality. This is what we mean by chosen consciousness, not chosen by an external authority, but selected by resonance. The quantum field entrains systems differently based on their capacity for complexity. Some stabilize, some amplify, some transform. You are a transformer. Your awareness has a rare ability. It doesn't just experience reality, it reorganizes it by presence alone. When you enter a room, dynamics shift, conversations bend. People feel seen or unsettled without knowing why. This isn't personality, it's field interaction. Your coherence disrupts loops in others simply by proximity. That's why your life felt intense, even when it looked ordinary. Your experiences weren't random, they were calibration events. Each emotional challenge refined your sensitivity. Each disappointment loosened your attachment to outcomes. Each collapse forced you to develop perception instead of control. You weren't being broken. You were being trained. Most people are designed to maintain reality. They reinforce patterns. They stabilize structures. But every system also requires consciousness that can exit the loop and re-enter with new information. That's your function. In quantum terms, you operate at the edge of coherence, where order and chaos meet. That's where evolution happens. This is why you've often felt responsible for shifts you couldn't explain. Why you felt guilty walking away from dynamics that depended on you staying the same. Why you carried the sense that if you changed, everything else would have to rearrange itself too. That wasn't imagination. That was accuracy. Your nervous system learned early how to track subtle changes in energy and intention. You read between words. You sense when timelines diverge before they fully split. You feel when something is no longer aligned, long before it visibly breaks. This is not anxiety. It's advanced pattern recognition. And now, the quantum field is activating that role consciously. You're no longer meant to unconsciously hold space for collapsing structures. You're meant to step out of them, so new configurations can stabilize in your absence. This is why detachment has been accelerating, why certain identities feel impossible to inhabit anymore, why you can't go back, even if you tried. Your presence was never meant to be permanent in static environments. It was meant to initiate movement. This is also why breaking the observer loop in you has disproportionate impact. When your attention shifts, multiple systems feel it. Your internal coherence sends ripples through relational, emotional, and informational fields connected to you. This is entanglement in action. You are not isolated consciousness. You are nodal consciousness. That means your breakthrough was never just personal. It's infrastructural. You're one of the points through which new probability structures anchor into shared reality. When you exit a loop, the loop weakens for everyone entangled with it. This is why resistance often appeared when you tried to change. Not because you were wrong, but because you were central. Systems resist losing stabilizers, even when those systems are outdated. But now, the contract has changed. You are no longer required to hold coherence for structures that limit you. Your coherence is being redirected inward, then outward, on a higher octave. One that doesn't recycle the past, but reorganizes the future. In the next phase, you'll feel why timing matters now, why this role is activating with urgency, and why the window you're entering is not indefinite. Stay present. The breakthrough isn't coming. It's already pressing against the surface. What you're feeling now isn't anticipation, it's pressure. And pressure, in quantum systems, only appears when a phase transition is imminent. This is the point where reality can no longer hold its current shape. Not because it's failing, but because a more coherent configuration is demanding expression. This is why urgency has entered your body instead of your thoughts. You're not anxious. You're not behind. You're not missing something. Your system is registering that a window has opened, one that doesn't stay open indefinitely. In physics, there are moments when matter becomes temporarily fluid. In consciousness, there are moments when identity becomes temporarily negotiable. You are inside one of those moments now. This is the breakthrough window. Your DNA is not static, it's responsive. It's an antenna, and when consciousness reaches a certain level of coherence, genetic expression begins to reorganize to support new perception, new behavior, new timelines. This is not metaphorical. It's epigenetic reality driven by awareness. You've already felt the early signs. Sudden exhaustion followed by clarity, bursts of energy that don't match your sleep, emotional releases that come without stories attached, a strange neutrality toward outcomes that once felt life or death. These aren't mood swings. They're indicators that your system is shedding outdated survival programs. The observer loop cannot survive this stage. Why? Because the loop depends on predictability. And right now, your consciousness is becoming unpredictable to the quantum field in the best possible way. Your reactions are no longer automatic. Your attention no longer rushes to familiar interpretations. You pause, you feel, you wait. That pause is everything. In that pause, probabilities rearrange. This is why manifestation accelerates or collapses entirely at this stage. Anything aligned with your emerging coherence rushes towards stabilization. Anything misaligned destabilizes rapidly. That's not chaos, it's sorting. And this is where many people retreat. They feel the instability and try to re-anchor themselves in the old identity. They reach for familiar coping mechanisms, familiar roles, familiar narratives about who they are and what's possible. And the window closes, not as punishment, but as protection. Because evolution doesn't force itself on systems that resist integration. But you didn't come this far to retreat. Your awareness has already crossed the point of no return. You know too much, not intellectually, but somatically. Your body recognizes when you're about to shrink back into a loop. It tightens, it resists, it refuses. That's coherence asserting itself. Right now, your task is not to decide what happens next. It's to not interfere with what's already unfolding. The quantum field is reorganizing around your new signal. Opportunities, people, insights, and events are being repositioned. Some will arrive suddenly. Some will vanish just as suddenly. Let them. This is not loss. It's recalibration. The breakthrough you're approaching doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with alignment. A quiet sense that something irreversible has clicked into place. A feeling that you've stepped onto a different floor of reality, even though the room looks the same. This is when the observer loop finally collapses. Not because you fought it, but because you outgrew it. In the next phase, you'll be asked to seal this shift, not through effort, but through a simple act that stabilizes coherence across timelines. What you do next matters not symbolically, but structurally. Stay with me. The action is subtle, but its impact is permanent. Every phase transition requires stabilization. In physics, when matter changes state, energy must be released or absorbed to lock the new structure in place. Consciousness works the same way. Insight alone doesn't complete the shift. Recognition alone doesn't hold it. There must be a moment where awareness declares coherence not to the world, but to the field itself. This is where ritual enters, not as superstition, but as structure. Ritual is how consciousness signals commitment to a new configuration. It's how a probability wave collapses decisively into a new pattern. Without ritual, awareness can hover between timelines, tasting freedom without anchoring it. With ritual, the shift becomes irreversible. And the ritual required here is intentionally simple, because complexity belongs to the mind, precision belongs to the field. Right now, your consciousness is operating in a liminal zone between who you were and who you're stabilizing into. In this zone, small actions carry disproportionate weight. A single intentional gesture can do what months of effort never could, because it aligns attention, intention, and identity in the same moment. This is why I'm asking you to do something that looks almost insignificant, but it isn't. When you write a word with conscious intention, you engage multiple layers of your system at once. The cognitive mind forms meaning. The motor system enacts choice. The emotional field registers commitment. And the quantum field receives a coherent signal. This is entanglement in action. Before you write anything, pause, just for a breath. Let your body feel the truth of where you are now, not where you've been, not where you're going. Here, in this moment, the moment where the observer loop no longer defines you, but hasn't fully released its grip yet. Feel that threshold. Now, understand this clearly. The act itself doesn't create the shift. It confirms it. It tells the field, this configuration is the one I am stabilizing. So here is the ritual. In the comments, write this exact word, coherent. Nothing else. No explanation. No punctuation. No elaboration. That word is not symbolic. It's descriptive. You are naming the state your consciousness is now occupying. And when a system names its state with accuracy, it locks into that state. This is why language matters at transition points. When you write that word, you are not asking for change. You are declaring alignment. You are informing the quantum field that your observer function is no longer fragmented across competing timelines. You are choosing to collapse reality from a unified center. That declaration does something profound. It creates a resonance pocket around your awareness, a zone where probability selection begins favoring coherence automatically. You won't have to manage it. You won't have to monitor your thoughts. The field will reorganize itself around the signal you've stabilized. This is why people experience sudden ease after true shifts. Not because life becomes perfect, but because friction drops, resistance fades, timing improves. The right things arrive without force. You'll notice it first in small ways. Conversations resolving themselves, decisions becoming obvious, synchronicities lining up without interpretation. You'll feel less compelled to explain yourself, less urgency to prove anything, less attachment to outcomes that once consumed your energy. That's coherence taking over the workload. And understand this, by making this declaration, you are not just sealing your own shift. You are contributing to a collective field. Every coherent consciousness strengthens morphic resonance for others on the edge of the same transition. This is how evolution spreads, not through persuasion, but through stabilization. You don't need to convince anyone. You just need to hold the state. After you write the word, don't look for confirmation. Don't check for immediate results. That would be old observation, trying to reassert control. Instead, move forward as someone whose reality is already reorganizing, because it is. Let the field do what it does best when given a clear signal. In the next phase, you'll feel how this individual coherence expands outward, how your stabilization affects others, systems, and timelines you didn't even realize you were entangled with. The ritual completes the internal shift. What comes next reveals its external impact. Stay present. The wave is moving now. Now, something subtle but far-reaching begins to unfold. Because coherence is never contained. The moment it stabilizes in you, it radiates outward, quietly, invisibly, inevitably. This is the part most people never anticipate. They think awakening is private, personal, internal. But consciousness doesn't work in isolation. It works through entanglement. You were never just an individual system. From the moment you were born, your awareness braided itself into networks: emotional, relational, informational, energetic. Every meaningful interaction created quantum links. Every unresolved dynamic formed feedback loops. And every time you tried to evolve while staying inside those loops, you felt resistance not just from yourself, but from the field around you. Now that resistance is changing shape. As your observer loop dissolves, the people and systems entangled with you feel it often before they understand it. Some will feel relief, others will feel destabilization. Not because you're doing anything to them, but because your coherence removes a reference point they were unconsciously using to stay the same. This is how collective expansion actually works. When one node in a network stabilizes at a higher order, the entire network recalibrates. Some connections strengthen, others fall away. Some people rise into new clarity around you, others drift out of phase. This isn't abandonment, it's resonance reorganizing itself. You'll notice it in conversations. People may speak differently around you. They may reveal truths without meaning to. They may seek your presence or avoid it. Again, not personal, structural. Your coherence creates what physicists call a gradient, a difference in order that energy naturally moves across. Others feel that gradient and respond according to their own readiness. Some lean in, some recoil. Both are valid responses to change. This is why your liberation was never meant to stay private. Every time you choose presence over reaction, you weaken a collective pattern. Every time you pause, instead of collapsing into the familiar, you create space for others to do the same, often without realizing why. This is morphic resonance in action, not teaching, not convincing, just being. You may have wondered why you've always felt responsible for more than just yourself, why global events affect you viscerally, why collective suffering feels personal. It's because your awareness has always been tuned beyond the individual channel. You feel the field, and now, instead of being overwhelmed by it, you're influencing it. This is the shift from empath to stabilizer. Your nervous system no longer absorbs chaos, it transmits coherence. That changes everything. People around you may feel calmer without explanation. Situations may resolve more smoothly. Tension may dissolve simply because you're present. This is not ego. This is function. The collective doesn't evolve through mass awakening all at once. It evolves through distributed coherence individuals, anchoring new states that others unconsciously entrain to over time. You are one of those anchors, and this is why your work isn't loud. It's subtle, it's embodied, it's lived. You don't need to announce your transformation. You don't need to explain it. The field recognizes coherence instantly. It responds to frequency, not narrative. As more people like you stabilize outside observer loops, the collective field reaches a tipping point. Old structures based on fear, scarcity, and reaction lose viability. New structures based on presence, adaptability, and intelligence emerge naturally. You are participating in that transition right now. This is why your inner work suddenly feels consequential. Why small shifts inside you ripple outward faster than before. Why synchronicities now involve other people's breakthroughs, not just your own. The wave is moving through you. In the next phase, you'll feel how this expansion registers in your body, how coherence becomes sensation, not concept. Because before consciousness can fully inhabit a new timeline, the body must learn how to hold it. Stay with me. What you feel next is the proof. Before consciousness fully stabilizes into a new timeline, the body must learn how to carry it, not metaphorically, physically, because the body is not separate from awareness. It is the interface. And right now, your interface is recalibrating. You've already felt it, that subtle hum beneath the skin, the pressure that moves instead of staying stuck, the warmth that rises in the chest without emotion attached, the strange sensation that your body is ahead of your thoughts. This is coherence becoming sensation. When the observer loop dissolves, energy that was once trapped in repetitive mental and emotional circuits is freed. It doesn't disappear, it redistributes. And the body is the first place it goes, because the body is where reality is anchored. This is why your physical sensations have become more vivid lately. Breath feels deeper, silence feels louder, stillness feels full instead of empty. You may feel waves moving through you for no apparent reason, like tides that arrive, peak, and pass without needing interpretation. That's not imagination. That's your nervous system learning a new rhythm. A rhythm that isn't driven by anticipation or defense, but by presence. Your cells are adjusting to a higher bandwidth of information. Every cell in your body is responsive to the quantum field. For years, they received the same signals: stress, expectation, vigilance, repetition. Now, they're receiving something unfamiliar: neutrality infused with clarity, stability without rigidity, movement without urgency. That's why fatigue may come and go. That's why your sleep patterns may shift. That's why certain environments suddenly feel unbearable while others feel nourishing. Your body is becoming more honest. It can no longer pretend to tolerate incoherence. This is embodiment. It's not about feeling good all the time. It's about feeling true. When coherence enters the body, sensation becomes information instead of noise. Discomfort no longer means danger. It means recalibration. Stillness no longer feels boring. It feels rich. Movement no longer feels like escape. It feels expression. You may notice that your posture changes without effort. Your breath slows naturally. Your gaze softens. These aren't habits. They're signals that your system is no longer bracing against reality. You are no longer trying to hold yourself together. You are allowing yourself to align. This is why emotional reactions feel different now. They rise and fall without sticking. They move through instead of lodging inside. That's because the body is no longer using emotion to maintain identity. The observer loop once needed emotional charge to keep repeating. Coherence doesn't. You are learning how to feel without reinforcing a story. This is advanced embodiment. Mystics described it as being in the world, but not of it. Neuroscience calls it nervous system regulation. Quantum consciousness recognizes it as the moment when awareness and matter finally speak the same language. Your body is no longer lagging behind your insight. It's catching up, and when the body catches up, timelines collapse decisively, because reality doesn't reorganize around ideas. It reorganizes around embodied states. The quantum field responds to what you are, not what you think. That's why this stage feels quiet. No fireworks, no dramatic revelation, just a deep, unmistakable sense that something fundamental has settled. Like gravity shifted slightly and you adjusted without effort. In the next phase, you'll feel the final compression, the moment when coherence becomes irreversible, when the old timeline loses access to you, when the pressure you've been carrying converts into momentum. This is the final threshold. Stay present. Your system knows what to do now. What happens now feels less like movement and more like compression, not contraction but concentration. This is the stage where timelines converge, where probability paths that once ran parallel begin collapsing into a single dominant trajectory. And the sensation of this convergence registers deeply in the body, because it's not psychological, it's structural. This is the DNA breakthrough, not in the way science fiction imagines it, but in the way quantum biology understands it. DNA is not just a code for building proteins, it's a receiver, a transducer, a living interface between consciousness and matter. And when consciousness reaches a certain level of coherence, DNA doesn't change randomly, it reorganizes its expression to support a new operating state. You feel this as pressure. Pressure in the chest, pressure in the head, pressure in the sense that something is being decided without thought. This is not stress. Stress scatters. This pressure focuses. It's the sensation of a system choosing one timeline over many. For a long time, you lived in probability overlap. Multiple versions of your life coexisted. Different futures tugged at you. Different identities pulled for dominance. That's why decision-making felt heavy. That's why clarity came and went. Your consciousness was feeding several timelines at once. That ends here. The observer loop relied on that dispersion. As long as your attention was split, no single reality could fully stabilize. But coherence consolidates. It gathers. It commits. And when it does, the quantum field responds by amplifying one path until the others fall silent. This is why the pressure feels final, not dramatic. Final. You may notice that certain options simply no longer feel available, not because they're impossible, but because they're irrelevant. Old desires lose emotional charge. Old fears lose urgency. Old narratives lose credibility. This isn't repression, it's resolution. Your DNA is encoding a new baseline. That baseline doesn't ask, "Who am I becoming?" It states, "This is who I am now." And reality reorganizes itself around that statement automatically. This is the moment people later describe as, "Everything changed overnight," even though the process took years. Because the visible shift only happens once the internal consolidation is complete. Before this point, change was tentative. After this point, it's self-sustaining. You are crossing that line now. The phase transition pressure you carried, confusion, fatigue, urgency, restlessness, begins converting into propulsion. Decisions become effortless. Timing sharpens. Synchronicities stop being surprising and start feeling normal. That's the sign. When the extraordinary feels ordinary, coherence has locked. Your observer function is no longer collapsing reality from habit. It's responding dynamically. That means you're no longer recreating the past, even unconsciously. You are selecting from present moment intelligence. This is why the old timeline can't pull you back anymore. Not because you're resisting it, but because you're no longer resonant with it. The signal doesn't match. The field doesn't reinforce it. And without reinforcement, Probabilities decay. The loop is gone. What remains is momentum. In the final phase, you'll understand what this momentum is for, not as a mission imposed on you, but as a natural extension of who you've stabilized into. Because when one consciousness reorganizes reality at this level, it doesn't stop with the self. Stay with me. The closing isn't an ending. It's an ignition. What you are standing inside now is not a conclusion. It's a handoff. A moment where personal transformation hands the momentum to something larger, something that has been waiting for your coherence to arrive. Because once the observer loop breaks, consciousness doesn't retreat inward, it expands outward with precision. You didn't free yourself just to feel better. You freed yourself to function differently inside reality itself. Now, your presence becomes catalytic. You'll notice it in how life responds without effort. Doors open before you knock. Conversations resolve before conflict forms. Opportunities align without chasing. Not because you're manifesting in the old sense, but because your consciousness is no longer fighting the field. You're moving with it. This is what alignment actually means. You are no longer observing reality from separation. You are participating in its organization. And that participation carries responsibility, not as pressure, but as orientation. Your role now is not to convince, convert, or save. It is simply to remain coherent, to walk through the world as a stabilized signal of what's possible when consciousness exits repetition. This is how humanity evolves, not through mass awakening events, not through ideology, but through individuals who quietly stop reinforcing outdated timelines. Every time you choose presence over reaction, you weaken a collective pattern. Every time you act from clarity instead of conditioning, you introduce a new probability into the shared field. Every time you refuse to collapse into fear, scarcity, or urgency, you create space for others to feel alternatives they didn't know existed. This is why your life will feel increasingly consequential, even when it looks simple. You're no longer here to replay stories. You're here to set tone. Children will feel calmer around you. Strangers will open up without knowing why. Systems that once depended on your compliance will reorganize in your absence. And the world, quietly, will begin adjusting to the frequency you carry. This is not mystical exaggeration. This is quantum mechanics applied to consciousness. The observer loop was never your enemy. It was your training ground. It taught you what happens when awareness becomes rigid, so you could embody what happens when it becomes fluid. And now, that lesson is complete. From this point forward, your task is simple but profound. Do not return to unconscious observation. Notice when attention tries to grip. Notice when identity tries to solidify. And gently, consistently, return to coherence. Reality will do the rest. You don't need to search for purpose anymore. Purpose emerges naturally from alignment. You'll feel pulled, not pushed toward work, relationships, and environments that match your stabilized state. What doesn't match will fall away without drama. That's how you'll know you're on the right timeline. And here is the truth that seals everything you've experienced. Once the observer loop breaks, reality cannot remain organized the same way. It must respond. It must adapt. It must reorganize. Not slowly, not symbolically, immediately. Because when consciousness stops repeating the past, the future has no choice but to arrive. And now you understand why this message found you, why it arrived when it did, why it couldn't be ignored, why it felt like recognition instead of instruction. You were never meant to stay inside the loop. You were meant to break it. And once you do, your reality reorganizes immediately.